The old pickup truck rolled slowly through the industrial district as the sun began to peek over the horizon. Behind the wheel sat Robert, a man whose hands told the story of 35 years working the same piece of land. His fingers were rough and stained from soil, his face weathered by countless seasons under the sun. At 62, he still woke up before dawn every single day. The truck bed was loaded with wooden crates filled with fresh vegetables, tomatoes that were picked just yesterday morning, their red skin still holding droplets of dew, lettuce so green and crisp you could almost hear it calling out from the boxes, onions that would make your eyes water just from looking at them. This was Robert's life, and he wouldn't have it any other way. People often asked him why he didn't retire. His back ached most mornings and his knees creaked when he bent down to tend his plants. But Robert always smiled when they asked. This wasn't just work for him. This was his passion, his purpose, his way of giving back to the world. Every vegetable he grew would feed someone's family. Every delivery he made kept the local food processing plant running. As he pulled into the plant's parking lot, Robert noticed the usual morning rush. Workers in blue uniforms hurried through the main entrance, lunch boxes in hand, ready for another day. Some of them waved at him through his windshield. He waved back with a genuine smile. Over the years, he had gotten to know many of these folks. They weren't just customers to him. They were friends. Robert parked his truck near the loading dock and climbed out slowly. His joints protested after the early morning drive, but he ignored the discomfort. He had vegetables to deliver, and people were counting on him. The plant had been buying his produce for over a decade now. It started small, just a few crates here and there, but word spread about the quality of his vegetables, and now they were one of his biggest customers. What most people at the plant didn't know was that Robert had a very personal connection to this place. His son David worked here, not just worked here, but had climbed the ladder from the very bottom to become the general manager. David had started on the factory floor right after high school, sweeping floors and doing whatever needed to be done. Through hard work, night school, and determination, he had earned promotions year after year. But Robert never talked about this connection. He believed in letting David make his own way in the world. The young man had earned his position through merit, not through family ties. Robert was proud beyond words, but he kept that pride quiet. He didn't want anyone thinking David got special treatment because his father delivered vegetables to the plant. The loading dock was busy this morning. Forklift operators moved pallets around while truck drivers waited their turn to unload. Robert grabbed a clipboard from his truck and walked toward the receiving office. His boots made soft sounds on the concrete floor as he approached the counter. Behind the desk sat Betty, a woman who had been working the receiving department for 15 years. She looked up when Robert approached, and her face lit up with a warm smile. Betty had always appreciated how polite and respectful Robert was, unlike some of the other vendors who acted like they owned the place. "Morning, Robert," she said cheerfully. "Got some beautiful vegetables for us today?" "Always do my best, Betty," Robert replied, handing her the clipboard with his delivery paperwork. "How's your grandson doing? Last time you mentioned he was trying out for the school baseball team." Betty's eyes sparkled as she talked about her grandson making the team. This was typical of Robert. He remembered details about people's lives, asked about their families, and genuinely cared about their answers. In a world where business was often cold and impersonal, Robert brought warmth and humanity to every interaction. As Betty processed his paperwork, Robert looked around the bustling facility. Through the windows of the office area above the factory floor, he could sometimes catch a glimpse of his son David. The young man would be in meetings or reviewing reports, making decisions that affected hundreds of employees. Robert felt a quiet surge of pride, but as always, he kept it to himself. A forklift operator named Carlos approached the counter. Robert had known Carlos for about 8 years now. The man had started working at the plant when his first child was born, needing a steady job to support his growing family. Over the years, Robert had watched Carlos grow more confident and skilled at his work. "Hey, Robert, how's the farm treating you?" Carlos asked while waiting for his turn at the counter. "Can't complain," Robert answered. "The weather's been good to us this season. How are things with you?" "How's the new baby doing?" Carlos broke into a wide grin. "She's perfect, man. Sleeping through the night now, finally. The wife and I are actually getting some rest." This was Robert's world. Real conversations with real people about real life. He didn't need fancy suits or corner offices to feel important. His importance came from the relationships he built, the honest work he did, and the food he provided to feed families throughout the community. Betty finished processing his paperwork and handed him a receipt. "Dock 7 is ready for you, Robert. They'll get you unloaded quick today." Robert tipped his worn baseball cap to her and walked back toward his truck. The loading dock was a symphony of activity. Machinery humming, workers calling out instructions, trucks backing up with their warning beepers echoing off the walls. But Robert moved through it all with calm confidence. This was his element. At Dock 7, 2 workers were already waiting to help unload his crates. They worked efficiently, treating his vegetables with the same care he put into growing them. Robert watched approvingly as they checked each crate, noting the quality and freshness. One of the workers, a young man named Tommy, who had only been at the plant for 6 months, struggled a bit with one of the heavier crates. Without being asked, Robert stepped in to help. At 62, he could still handle the physical demands of his work, and he never expected others to do what he wouldn't do himself. "Thanks, Mr. Robert," Tommy said gratefully. "These tomatoes look amazing. My mom would love to get her hands on some of these for her cooking." Robert smiled and made a mental note. Next week, he would bring a small bag of his best tomatoes for Tommy to take home to his mother. It was gestures like these that made Robert more than just a vendor. He was a friend, a mentor, and a positive force in the lives of people who worked hard for their paychecks. As the unloading finished, Robert walked around his truck one more time, making sure everything was secure for the drive home. The sun was fully up now, and the plant was hitting its stride for another productive day. Soon his vegetables would be processed and packaged, ready to feed families across the region. Robert climbed back into his truck and started the engine. Tomorrow he would be back again with another load of fresh produce. Day after day, season after season, year after year. It was simple work, honest work, and it filled him with quiet satisfaction. He had no idea that his peaceful routine was about to be shattered in ways he never could have imagined. Tuesday morning started like any other day for Robert. He loaded his truck with fresh vegetables before sunrise, just as he had done thousands of times before. The tomatoes were particularly beautiful this week, deep red and perfectly ripe. The lettuce was crisp and green, and the onions were firm and ready for processing. It should have been a good day, but inside the plant, tension was already building. The morning shift had started with problems. 2 machines had broken down overnight, putting the production line behind schedule. Orders were backing up, and the pressure was mounting on everyone to catch up. In situations like these, some people rise to the challenge with grace. Others let the stress bring out their worst qualities. 3 supervisors were having the kind of morning that tests a person's character. Jake Miller had been a supervisor for 5 years and thought he knew everything about running the place. Brad Stevens was newer to his position, but made up for his inexperience with an aggressive attitude. The third man, Tony Walsh, had been passed over for promotion twice and carried a chip on his shoulder that seemed to grow heavier each day. These 3 men had been letting their frustrations build all morning. When machines break down, it creates a domino effect. Workers get nervous about meeting their quotas. Quality control gets backed up. Shipping schedules get delayed, and somewhere in that chain of stress, someone usually becomes a target for all the built-up anger. Robert pulled his truck into the loading dock area at exactly 8:30, the same time he always arrived. He had no way of knowing about the production problems or the mood inside the building. To him, this was just another delivery day. He climbed out of his truck with his usual calm demeanor, ready to unload his vegetables and chat with the workers he had come to know as friends. The loading dock was more chaotic than usual. Forklift operators were moving faster, trying to make up for lost time. Workers were calling out instructions with more urgency in their voices. But Robert had seen busy mornings before. He simply positioned his truck at the designated spot and began preparing for the unloading process. That's when Jake Miller spotted him from across the dock. Jake was already frustrated about the machine breakdowns, and now he saw what he considered another problem. In his stressed state of mind, Robert's truck looked like it was taking up too much space, blocking access to other loading areas. Of course, Robert was parked exactly where he always parked, in the same spot the plant had assigned to him years ago. But stressed people don't always see things clearly. Jake stormed over toward Robert's truck, his face already red with anger. Brad and Tony followed behind him, feeding off each other's negative energy. The three of them approached like a pack, each one making the others feel more justified in their growing rage. "Hey, old man," Jake shouted as he got closer to Robert. "You can't park that piece of junk there. Don't you see we're busy here?" Robert looked up from his clipboard, genuinely confused. He had been parking in this same spot for over 10 years. No one had ever complained before. In fact, the receiving department had specifically told him this was his designated area. "I'm sorry if there's a problem," Robert said calmly. "Betty in receiving told me to use this spot. If you need me to move, just let me know where." But Jake wasn't interested in reasonable solutions. The stress of the morning had pushed him past the point of rational thinking. He saw Robert's polite response as weakness, and that only made him angrier. "Don't give me that innocent act," Jake snarled. "You farmers think you can just do whatever you want. This is our workplace, not your personal parking lot." Brad stepped forward, wanting to show Jake that he was just as tough. "Yeah, we've got real work to do here. We don't have time to deal with some old guy who doesn't know where he belongs." Robert felt his stomach tighten. In all his years of delivering to the plant, he had never encountered this kind of hostility. The workers here had always treated him with respect. These three men were different, and their anger seemed to be growing by the minute. "Gentlemen, I don't want any trouble," Robert said, his voice still calm but with a slight tremor that revealed his growing concern. "I'm just here to deliver vegetables like I do every week. If there's a better place for me to park, just point me in the right direction." Tony Walsh had been quiet up to this point, but now he decided to join in. Tony had been having a bad year. He had been passed over for promotion twice. His wife was constantly complaining about money, and he felt like everyone at the plant was getting ahead while he stayed stuck in the same position. Looking at Robert, he saw someone he could finally take his frustrations out on. "Listen here, Grandpa," Tony said, his voice dripping with contempt. "We don't need you coming in here acting like you own the place. You're just some dirt farmer who probably can't even read the signs." The words hit Robert like a physical blow. In all his 62 years, he had rarely encountered such unprovoked hostility. He had always believed in treating people with respect and dignity, regardless of their position in life. He had taught his children the same values. Now he was facing three men who seemed to have forgotten what basic human decency looked like. Other workers on the loading dock were beginning to notice the confrontation. Some of them knew Robert personally and were shocked by what they were witnessing, but the three supervisors were in positions of authority, and most workers were hesitant to intervene in what appeared to be a management issue. Jake moved closer to Robert, invading his personal space in a way that was clearly meant to intimidate. "You know what your problem is, old man? You don't know your place. You come in here with your beat-up truck and your dirty clothes, thinking you're somebody important." Robert took a small step backward. Not out of fear, but out of a lifetime habit of trying to defuse tense situations. "I'm just trying to do my job," he said quietly. "I've been delivering here for over 10 years. I've never had any problems before." "Well, you've got problems now," Brad said, moving to Robert's other side. The three men were now surrounding the elderly farmer, their body language becoming increasingly aggressive. What happened next would be talked about at the plant for months to come. Jake, frustrated by Robert's calm responses and feeling emboldened by his two companions, made a decision that would change everything. He reached out and gave Robert a hard shove, pushing him back against the side of his truck. "Maybe this will help you understand," Jake said, his voice loud enough for everyone on the loading dock to hear. "You're not wanted here, old man. Take your garbage vegetables and find somewhere else to sell them." Robert stumbled slightly from the push but managed to keep his balance. The physical contact had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. This was no longer just verbal harassment. This was assault, and it was happening in front of dozens of witnesses. Tony decided to escalate things even further. "You heard him, Grandpa. Get out of here before things get worse for you." The threat hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Robert looked around at the faces watching the confrontation. Some looked shocked. Others seemed uncomfortable, but no one was stepping forward to help him. He was alone, facing three men who seemed to have lost all sense of professional behavior. Robert straightened his shoulders and looked directly at Jake Miller. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but steady. "I've been coming here for over 10 years, and I've always tried to treat everyone with respect. I don't know what's gotten into you men today, but this isn't right." Jake's face turned an even deeper shade of red. "Don't you dare lecture us about what's right, you old fool. We're the supervisors here. You're nobody." The word nobody echoed across the loading dock. Robert felt something break inside him, not from fear or anger but from sadness. Sadness that three men could be so consumed by their own problems that they would attack an innocent person. Sadness that the workplace he had come to think of as friendly had suddenly become hostile. But Robert was tougher than these three men realized. 35 years of farming had taught him that storms eventually pass. He would weather this one too, with his dignity intact. The silence that followed the confrontation lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity to everyone who witnessed it. Then, like a dam breaking, the reaction began to spread throughout the loading dock. Workers who had been watching from a distance started moving closer. Others pulled out their phones, some to record what was happening, others to call for help. Linda Rodriguez had been working in the plant's quality control department for 12 years. She was on her way to check a shipment when she saw the three supervisors surrounding Robert. Linda had always appreciated how Robert took time to ask about her family and remember her children's names. Seeing him being pushed and threatened made her blood boil. "This is completely out of line," Linda said loudly, her voice carrying across the dock. She walked straight toward the group, her safety vest and clipboard marking her as someone with authority in the plant. Jake Miller spun around to face her, his anger now redirecting toward this new challenge to his behavior. "This doesn't concern you, Linda. Get back to work." "Like hell it doesn't concern me," Linda shot back. "Robert's been nothing but respectful to everyone here for years. What you three are doing is harassment, and I'm reporting it." More workers were gathering now. Carlos, the forklift operator who had chatted with Robert earlier, parked his machine and walked over. Tommy, the young worker Robert had helped with the heavy crate, stood with his mouth open in shock. Betty from the receiving office had heard the commotion and came hurrying out of her office. "What in the world is going on here?" Betty demanded, looking at the scene in front of her. She had been processing Robert's paperwork just minutes ago, and everything had seemed normal. Now she found him backed against his truck by three angry supervisors. Brad Stevens, realizing that the situation was spiraling out of control, tried to take charge. "Everyone needs to calm down and get back to work. This is a supervisor matter." "Supervisor matter?" Carlos said, his voice rising. "I saw you guys push Robert. That's not supervision, that's assault." The word assault rippled through the growing crowd. Workers began pulling out their phones not just to record, but to call security and management. In the modern workplace, incidents like this don't stay contained for long. Robert, still standing against his truck, looked around at all the faces surrounding him. He saw anger, concern, and determination in the eyes of people he had come to know over the years. These workers, many of whom he had shared brief conversations with, were now standing up for him. It was both heartwarming and overwhelming. "Please," Robert said, his voice cutting through the noise. "I don't want anyone getting in trouble because of me. I just want to finish my delivery and go home." But his words only seemed to make the workers more determined to stand up for him. Linda Rodriguez was already on her phone with the main office describing what she had witnessed. Her voice was clear and precise as she reported the incident to management. "Yes, I'm telling you exactly what I saw. 3 supervisors physically assaulted a vendor on the loading dock. There are at least 20 witnesses here." Jake Miller realized that the situation had gotten completely out of hand. His moment of anger had turned into a company-wide incident. He tried to regain control by raising his voice above the crowd. "Everyone calm down right now. This is being blown way out of proportion. The old man was blocking the dock and we were just trying to get him moved." "By pushing him?" Tommy called out. "The young man might have been new to the plant, but he knew right from wrong. My grandmother is his age. If someone pushed her like that, I'd be calling the police." The mention of police made all 3 supervisors realize just how serious this had become. What had started as a bad morning and some misplaced anger was now threatening to become a legal matter. Tony Walsh, who had been relatively quiet since the initial confrontation, decided to try a different approach. "Look, maybe we all got a little heated. It's been a stressful morning with the machine breakdowns. We can work this out without making a big deal of it." But it was too late for damage control. The crowd of workers wasn't interested in excuses. They had seen something that violated their sense of basic fairness, and they weren't going to let it slide. Betty marched up to the 3 supervisors with fire in her eyes. "I've been working here 15 years, and I've never seen anything like this. Robert has been delivering to us for over a decade, and he's always been nothing but professional and kind." "That's right," Carlos added. This man remembers our names, asks about our families, helps us when we need it. And you three attack him for no reason? More workers were arriving as word spread through the plant. The morning shift was now buzzing with news of the incident. Social media posts were already appearing, though most workers were smart enough not to use names or identify the company specifically. Security arrived on the scene. 2 officers in uniform who were used to dealing with minor workplace disputes but rarely saw anything like this. The lead security officer, a man named Frank who had worked at the plant for 8 years, surveyed the situation. "All right, everyone back up and give us some room," Frank announced. "We need to talk to everyone involved and get this sorted out." Jake Miller saw the security officers as his chance to regain control of the narrative. "Frank, thank goodness you're here. This whole thing has been blown way out of proportion. We were just trying to get this vendor to move his truck and the workers are making it sound like something it wasn't." But Frank had already been briefed by the main office during his walk to the loading dock. The incident had been reported through multiple channels and management was taking it very seriously. "Mr. Miller, I'm going to need you and the other supervisors to come with me for questioning. This is being treated as a potential assault case." The color drained from Jake's face. An assault case meant police involvement, possible criminal charges, and definitely serious consequences with his job. What had seemed like a moment of justified anger was now threatening to destroy his career. Robert, still standing by his truck, watched as the 3 supervisors were led away by security. The crowd of workers gradually began to disperse, but many of them came over to check on him before leaving. "Are you okay, Robert?" Linda asked, her voice full of genuine concern. "Do you need medical attention? Should we call an ambulance?" "I'm fine," Robert replied, though his hands were shaking slightly from the adrenaline. "Just a little shaken up. I've never experienced anything like that before." "None of us have," Carlos said. "In all my years here, I've never seen supervisors act like that. It's completely unacceptable." Tommy approached hesitantly, still looking upset by what he had witnessed. "Mr. Robert, I'm really sorry that happened to you. You've always been so nice to all of us. You didn't deserve that." Robert put a gentle hand on the young man's shoulder. "Thank you, Tommy, all of you. I'm grateful to have friends like you here." Betty was still fuming as she watched security escort the 3 supervisors toward the main building. "Those 3 have been getting worse and worse lately, acting like they own the place, talking down to people. But I never thought they'd go this far." "What happens now?" Carlos asked. "Now it goes up to management," Linda said. "And with all the witnesses we have, plus whatever security cameras caught, those 3 are in serious trouble." Frank, the security officer, returned to the loading dock after escorting the supervisors to the office area. He approached Robert with a clipboard and a serious expression. "Sir, I need to get your statement about what happened here. Also, management wants you to know that they're treating this very seriously. They've asked me to tell you that you have their full support." Robert nodded, still processing everything that had occurred. "I just want to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. No vendor or worker should have to deal with that kind of treatment." "Don't worry," Frank replied. "After today, I don't think it will." As Robert began giving his statement, he had no idea that his son David was already receiving phone calls about the incident. The general manager of the plant was about to learn that his own father had been assaulted by his supervisors. And when that revelation came to light, the consequences would be far more severe than anyone could imagine. David Martinez was reviewing quarterly production reports in his corner office when his phone rang. As the general manager of the plant, he was used to getting calls about various workplace issues. Equipment breakdowns, scheduling conflicts, minor disputes between workers. But the voice on the other end of the line made him sit up straight in his chair. "David, this is Linda from Quality Control. We have a serious situation on the loading dock. 3 of your supervisors just physically assaulted a vendor. There are multiple witnesses and security is involved." David felt his stomach drop. Assault was the kind of word that meant lawyers, investigations, and potentially criminal charges. "Which supervisors?" he asked, already reaching for his jacket. "Jake Miller, Brad Stevens, and Tony Walsh. They attacked Robert, the farmer who delivers our vegetables." "David, it was completely unprovoked. The man was just trying to do his job." The name hit David like a lightning bolt. "Robert, the farmer who delivered vegetables." David's hand froze on his jacket as the full weight of Linda's words sank in. She was talking about his father, Linda. "I need you to repeat exactly what you just said," David said, his voice carefully controlled despite the hurricane of emotions building inside him. The three supervisors attacked Robert Martinez, the vegetable vendor. They pushed him, threatened him, called him names. It was horrible, David. At least 20 people saw it happen. David closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Robert Martinez wasn't just any vendor. He was David's father, though almost no one at the plant knew about their relationship. For over 10 years, David had watched his father make deliveries to the facility, never once asking for special treatment or even mentioning their family connection. "Is he hurt?" David asked, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. "He seems okay physically, but he's pretty shaken up. The whole thing was just vicious and unprofessional. I've never seen anything like it. Where is he now?" Still on the loading dock, giving his statement to security. "David, you need to know that everyone who saw this is furious. The workers really respect Robert. He's been nothing but kind to all of us for years." David hung up the phone and sat in silence for a moment. His father had been assaulted at his own workplace by his own supervisors. The irony was almost too much to process. The same three men who had been causing morale problems throughout the plant had just attacked the person David respected most in the world. He had been building a case against those supervisors for months. Jake Miller had been written up twice for inappropriate behavior toward workers. Brad Stevens had received multiple complaints about his aggressive management style. Tony Walsh had been caught falsifying time records and had shown increasingly poor judgment in his decisions. David had been planning to address their behavior through the proper channels, documenting everything carefully before taking action, but now they had crossed a line that made all of his careful planning irrelevant. His phone rang again. This time it was Frank from security. "Mr. Martinez, we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. 3 supervisors have been involved in an assault incident with a vendor. I have them in separate offices for questioning, and I need you to review the security footage." "I'll be right down," David said. "Frank, is the vendor still on site?" "Yes, sir, he's completing his statement." "Should I have him wait for you?" David hesitated for a moment. He needed to see his father, to make sure he was really okay, but he also needed to handle this situation as a manager, not as a son. "Yes, please ask him to wait. I want to speak with him personally." David walked through the plant toward the security office, his mind racing. Employees who saw him nodded respectfully, unaware of the personal storm raging inside their general manager. Some of them had probably witnessed the assault on his father. In the security office, Frank had the incident footage queued up on his computer. "This is from camera 7 on the loading dock," he said, pressing play. David watched in silent rage as the scene unfolded on the screen. He saw his father approaching with his clipboard, clearly just trying to do his job. He watched the 3 supervisors converge on him like a pack of wolves. The audio wasn't clear, but their body language told the story clearly enough. Then came the moment that made David's hands clench into fists. Jake Miller pushed his father back against the truck. The man who had taught David about dignity, hard work, and treating people with respect was being physically assaulted by employees under David's supervision. "Have you shown this to anyone else?" David asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Just my supervisor and the HR director. They're both reviewing it now." "Good. I want copies made immediately. This is going to result in immediate termination for all 3 supervisors, and possibly criminal charges." Frank nodded, having expected this response. The vendor has been very professional through all of this. He doesn't seem interested in making a big scene, just wants to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. That sounded exactly like something his father would say. Even after being assaulted, Robert would be more concerned about other people than about himself. "Where is he now?" "Conference room B, I can take you there." David walked down the hallway toward the conference room, trying to prepare himself for seeing his father. He needed to be both the concerned son and the professional manager. It was going to be the most difficult conversation of his career. When David opened the conference room door, Robert looked up from the papers he was signing. For a moment, father and son just looked at each other. Robert's eyes widened slightly when he saw who had entered the room. "Dad?" David said quietly, closing the door behind him. "Are you hurt?" "I'm okay, son. Just a little rattled." Robert stood up slowly, and David could see that his hands were still shaking slightly. "I didn't expect to see you down here. When security told me what happened, I had to come see for myself." David struggled with how to balance his personal concern with his professional responsibilities. "Dad, I need you to know that what happened today is completely unacceptable. Those 3 men will face serious consequences." Robert nodded slowly. I've been coming here for over 10 years, David. I've never had anything like this happen before. Those three seemed so angry, so full of rage. I don't even know what I did to set them off. You didn't do anything wrong, David said firmly. They've been having performance issues for months. Their behavior toward you is just the latest example of their poor judgment. The workers here were wonderful, Robert continued. Linda, Carlos, Betty, all of them stood up for me. They didn't have to do that, but they did. You've got good people working for you, son. David felt a surge of pride both in his employees and in his father. Even after being assaulted, Robert was focusing on the positive actions of others rather than dwelling on his own mistreatment. Dad, I have to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you want to press criminal charges against those three men? Robert was quiet for a long moment, considering the question carefully. What I want is for this never to happen to anyone else. If pressing charges helps prevent that, then yes, I'll do it. David felt a mixture of relief and determination. His father was giving him permission to pursue this to the full extent of the law. There's something else we need to discuss, David said carefully. Our relationship isn't generally known around here. After today, that might change. Are you worried it will affect your position? Robert asked with concern. No, I'm worried it will affect yours. People might think you've been getting special treatment all these years. Robert actually smiled for the first time since the incident. Son, I've been delivering vegetables here for over a decade. If anyone thinks I've been getting special treatment, they haven't been paying attention to how hard I work or how fairly I've been treated. David realized his father was right. Robert had earned his reputation at the plant through his own actions, not through family connections. If anything, keeping their relationship secret had prevented Robert from receiving any benefits he might have been entitled to. A knock on the conference room door interrupted their conversation. Frank entered with a serious expression. Mr. Martinez, the HR director, needs to speak with you. The three supervisors are demanding to know why they're being treated so harshly over what they're calling a minor disagreement with a vendor. David looked at his father, then back at Frank. Tell the HR director I'll be right there. And Frank, make sure those three men understand that this is far from over. As David prepared to leave the conference room, Robert called after him. David, whatever you decide to do about this, make sure you do it for the right reasons. Not because I'm your father, but because it's the right thing to do. David paused at the door and looked back at the man who had taught him everything about integrity and moral courage. Dad, those three men attacked one of the most decent people I've ever known. The fact that you happen to be my father just makes their behavior even more inexcusable. As David walked toward the HR office to deal with the three supervisors, he realized that this incident was about to change everything at the plant, and those changes would start with revealing a truth that had been hidden for far too long. The next morning arrived with an electricity in the air that everyone at the plant could feel. Word had spread quickly about the incident on the loading dock, and workers were arriving earlier than usual, eager to see what management's response would be. The three supervisors who had caused the confrontation were nowhere to be seen, which only fueled more speculation and conversation. David Martinez had spent most of the previous evening in meetings with HR, legal counsel, and upper management. The security footage was damning. The witness statements were consistent, and the decision about the three supervisors had been swift and unanimous. But David had asked for something more than just disciplinary action. He wanted to address the entire plant about what had happened and what it meant for the company's culture going forward. At 9 o'clock sharp, the plant-wide announcement system crackled to life. All employees, please report to the main assembly area for a mandatory meeting. Production will resume after the meeting concludes. Workers filed into the large open area usually reserved for safety meetings and company announcements. There was a buzz of conversation as people speculated about what they were going to hear. Linda Rodriguez sat with several of her co-workers from quality control, all of them hoping that management had taken the assault seriously. Carlos stood with his forklift operator crew, still angry about what he had witnessed the day before. Betty from receiving had arrived early and secured a spot near the front. She had been thinking about the incident all night, replaying the scene in her mind and getting angrier each time. Tommy, the young worker who had been so shocked by the supervisor's behavior, stood with a group of newer employees who were still processing what they had seen. At exactly 9:15, David Martinez walked onto the small platform at the front of the assembly area. He was accompanied by the HR director and the plant's security chief. The room fell silent as David approached the microphone. "Thank you all for gathering here this morning," David began, his voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "I want to address the incident that occurred on our loading dock yesterday, and I want to discuss what it means for our company moving forward." The silence in the room was complete. Every worker was focused on their general manager, waiting to hear how seriously management was taking what had happened. First, let me be absolutely clear about what took place. 3 of our supervisors physically assaulted a vendor who has been serving this company faithfully for over 10 years. This vendor was doing nothing more than his job when he was pushed, threatened, and verbally abused by men who were supposed to represent the leadership of this company. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Workers were relieved to hear that management wasn't trying to downplay or excuse what had happened. I want to thank the employees who witnessed this incident and immediately reported it to security and management. Your quick action and willingness to stand up for what's right reflects the kind of character that makes this company strong. Linda Rodriguez felt a surge of pride. She had been right to call the incident in immediately, and it was gratifying to hear the general manager acknowledge that. The 3 supervisors involved in this incident have been terminated, effective immediately. Their behavior was completely unacceptable, and there is no place in this company for anyone who would treat vendors, co-workers, or any human being with such disrespect. The assembly area erupted in applause. Workers had been hoping for serious consequences, and hearing that the 3 supervisors had been fired sent a clear message about the company's values. David waited for the applause to die down before continuing. But terminating these individuals is not enough. This incident has shown me that we need to do better as a company in creating a culture where respect and dignity are not just words in our employee handbook, but values that are lived every single day. The room was silent again as workers absorbed the significance of what their general manager was saying. "I want to introduce you to someone," David said, gesturing toward the side of the platform. "Robert Martinez has been delivering fresh vegetables to our plant for over 10 years. Many of you know him as a kind, respectful man who takes time to learn your names and ask about your families. What you may not know is that Robert is also my father." The gasp that went through the assembly area was audible. Workers turned to each other with wide eyes, processing this unexpected revelation. The farmer they had all come to respect was the general manager's father. Robert walked slowly onto the platform, looking slightly uncomfortable with the attention, but maintaining his usual dignified bearing. He was wearing his best clean shirt and had obviously made an effort to look presentable for the occasion. "Dad," David said, his voice softening slightly. "Would you like to say something to everyone?" Robert approached the microphone hesitantly. He wasn't used to speaking to large groups, but he could see the faces of people he had come to know and care about over the years. Linda, Carlos, Betty, Tommy, and dozens of others who had shown him kindness and respect. "Thank you," Robert said, his voice quiet but clear through the sound system. "First, I want you all to know that I never asked for special treatment because of my relationship to David. I never even told him about the delivery schedule or asked him to make things easier for me. I believe in earning respect through actions, not through family connections." The workers nodded in understanding. They had all seen Robert arrive early, work hard, and treat everyone with genuine kindness. His character had been evident long before they knew about his family ties. "What happened yesterday was difficult for me," Robert continued, his voice gaining strength. "But what made it bearable was seeing so many of you stand up and say that it was wrong. You didn't have to do that. You could have looked the other way or decided it wasn't your business. But you chose to defend someone who needed defending." Linda Rodriguez felt tears starting to form in her eyes. This man had endured assault and humiliation, and he was thanking them for doing what any decent person should do. "Over the years, I've gotten to know many of you," Robert said, looking out at the faces in the crowd. "I know about your families, your dreams, your challenges. You've shared parts of your lives with me, and that has meant more than you can imagine. In return, I want to share something with you." Robert paused, collecting his thoughts before continuing. "I learned a long time ago that the measure of a person isn't their job title or how much money they make. It's how they treat other people, especially when no one is watching. Yesterday, when everyone was watching, you all showed the kind of character that makes me proud to know you." The applause started slowly, but built to a crescendo that filled the entire assembly area. Workers were clapping not just for Robert, but for the values he represented and for the validation that their actions had mattered. David stepped back to the microphone as the applause died down. My father has taught me many things over the years, but one of the most important lessons is this. Every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their position or background. He paused, looking out at the workforce that he was responsible for leading. Starting today, we are implementing new policies and training programs to ensure that what happened yesterday never happens again. We will have mandatory respect and diversity training for all supervisors and managers. We will establish a confidential reporting system for incidents of harassment or inappropriate behavior, and we will make it clear that treating vendors, co-workers, or anyone else with disrespect is not just a fireable offense, but a violation of everything this company stands for. Carlos raised his hand from the crowd. Mr. Martinez, what about the criminal charges against those 3 supervisors? David looked at his father, who nodded slightly. My father has decided to press charges for assault. This incident has been reported to the police and they will handle it according to the law. We support his decision completely. Betty from receiving called out, Will Robert continue making deliveries here? Robert stepped forward to answer. If you'll have me, I'd like to continue serving this plant. You've all become like family to me, and yesterday proved that this is where I belong. The applause was immediate and overwhelming. Workers were on their feet, showing their appreciation for a man who had chosen forgiveness and moving forward rather than walking away from a place where he had been hurt. As the meeting concluded and workers began filing back to their stations, the atmosphere in the plant had changed dramatically. There was a sense of purpose and unity that hadn't existed the day before. The assault on Robert had been a terrible thing, but it had also revealed the strength of character that existed throughout the workforce. Over the following weeks, the changes David had promised began to take effect. The new training programs helped supervisors understand their responsibility to create respectful work environments. The reporting system gave workers confidence that inappropriate behavior would be addressed quickly and seriously. The 3 former supervisors faced criminal charges for assault, and their trials became a matter of public record in the local community. The incident served as a warning to anyone who might think that position or authority gave them the right to treat others poorly. Robert continued making his deliveries, but now there was an added warmth in his interactions with the workers. They all knew his story, knew about his relationship to their general manager, and knew that he had chosen to forgive and move forward rather than harbor resentment. One morning, several months after the incident, Tommy approached Robert's truck with something in his hands. Mr. Robert, I wanted to give you this, he said, holding out a small wooden plaque. Robert read the inscription, to Robert Martinez, who showed us that dignity and respect are not just words but ways of living, from your friends at the plant. It was signed by over 100 employees representing nearly every department in the facility. Robert felt his eyes getting misty as he looked at all the signatures. Thank you, Tommy. This means more to me than you can know. Mr. Robert, Tommy said, my mom still talks about those tomatoes you brought her. She said they were the best she ever tasted. Robert smiled, remembering the small gesture that had meant so much to the young man's family. Tell her I'll bring her some more next harvest. And Tommy, thank you for standing up for me that day. It took courage. It was the right thing to do, Tommy replied. You taught us that by how you handled everything afterwards. As Robert drove away from the plant that morning, he reflected on how much had changed since that terrible day on the loading dock. The assault had been painful and humiliating, but it had also revealed something beautiful about human nature. When faced with injustice, good people will stand up and speak out. The incident had strengthened the plant's culture, improved its policies, and brought people together around shared values of respect and dignity. Sometimes Robert realized the worst moments in life can become the foundation for the best changes, and in his quiet way, a humble farmer had helped transform an entire workplace, proving that character and kindness are more powerful than any position or title.